I thought this book was about me. Don't they know my time on Earth is running out? I've got to get to Camp Half-Blood and face the last surviving members of the Triumvirate. And somehow, if I manage to survive that, I have to face my nemesis Python. Why, Father, are you torturing me so?
Hey guys, it's Rick Riordan, and I'm here with Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. We hope you guys enjoy the evening. Yay! Welcome, everybody. I am so happy to be here for the 8-day virtual tour for the Tower of Nero. We are going all around the U.S., and we're not even leaving our houses, but we're going to have a lot of fun. And we've got special guest appearances at every event, different guest stars, and I'll tell you about that in a second. So the Tower of Nero, where are we going? We are virtually visiting Brookline Booksmith in my hometown of Boston. We're going to New York City for Books of Wonder, Politics and Prose in DC, Little Shop of Stories in Decatur, Georgia, Blue Willow Bookshop in Houston, Barnes & Noble, Kepler's in Menlo Park, California, and Books A Million. Whew, I'm tired just thinking about it. Let's get started. So what's the book about? The Tower of Nero features our old friend Apollo, god of music, god of poetry, god of medicine, god of archery, an all-around just super duper dude. Unfortunately, as you may know, if you've been following the series, Apollo is not exactly Apollo these days. No, Apollo is Lester Papadopoulos. Poor teenage Lester, who has really no skills, no redeeming features at all, and he's sent down to Earth by his father Zeus. He is grounded and forced to become a mortal kid and somehow find his way back to earning his godhood on Mount Olympus. Well, so how's he doing with this quest? I guess he's made some progress over the last 4 books. He's gone all over the place. He's seen a lot of stuff, but unfortunately, he's still got a big couple of enemies that he's got to fight, and he's got to really determine what is it going to take to be Apollo again. And when he does, if he does turn into Apollo again, what is that even going to look like? Here's a look at all the places we have been on this amazing Lester farewell tour. Anyway, he hopes it's a farewell tour to the mortal world. We started, as you might remember, back in the Hidden Oracle in Manhattan. That's where he fell to Earth, went to Percy Jackson's house for help. Percy was really totally psyched to be asked to do yet another quest. But we got him to Camp Half-Blood, and then we sent him on his way. From there, Lester went to Indianapolis, where he met some friends at the way station. He went down to Palm Springs and then Santa Monica. Oh, some bad stuff happened in Santa Monica. I can't talk about it. But then from there, he went to Camp Jupiter in the Bay Area. And now he's heading back to the East Coast to face one final great ordeal. So, what do you have to look forward to? Well, you're going to see Meg McCaffrey again, that's for sure. Our friend Meg, as you know, is the daughter of Demeter. She is really great with fruit, vegetables, flowering vines, and she's not too shabby dual-wielding scimitars either. So it's a good thing that Lester / Apollo has her on his side. However, there's another couple that is going to be pretty big in this book, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be happy to hear that Will and Nico, campers extraordinaire at Camp Half-Blood, are back, and they have a big role to play in this. Now, I love this artwork. This is Viria artwork. I'm not sure why it's like Nico looks like he's a foot shorter than Will. I don't think that's actually accurate, but that's okay. That's okay. They look great. And Rachel Elizabeth Dare, our friend, the Oracle of Delphi. Now, Rachel hasn't been able to do many prophecies because Python, the great serpent, has taken over Delphi itself. So she's been kind of cut off from the future. Is she going to get back her ability? That depends on Apollo. So we'll see what happens, but Rachel is along for this adventure and she's got a big part to play. Is she going to hit anybody with her blue plastic hairbrush? Wait and see. So, what's the quest? Well, as you know, it's already cost us quite a bit. Jason Grace, spoiler alert, yeah, I can't even make myself say it, but we said goodbye to a dear friend in the Trials of Apollo, and it really, really hurt. Nevertheless, this is sometimes what happens. Dare I say, it's usually what happens when you're a demigod. Just like Percy Jackson warned you in The Lightning Thief on page 1, most of the time, you end up dying in painful, nasty ways. I wish that wasn't true, but we're going to make it count, though. Jason, my man, to you. Here are some of the many things that have tried to kill Lester so far in the Trials of Apollo. You would think that after a while, I'd run out of Greek monsters to talk about, but that never seems to be the case. There's so much in Greek mythology that the more you get into it, the more you find. So see, these are just some of the wild, wacky kind of things that we've already faced. We've got Pandos. Oh, that's another painful memory. Our poor Pandos friend. We've got the troglodytes. Yeah, I love the troglodytes. You're going to meet them in this book. And all of the rest, they're coming your way in the Tower of Nero. And of course, Nero himself is coming your way. Oh, this guy. I mean, you thought Caligula was bad. You thought Commodus was vain and narcissistic. Take both of them and blend them together and multiply that nastiness by 10, and you've got Nero. This guy, I don't even know. And he's Meg McCaffrey's sort of stepfather too. So that makes things really complicated. He's this sort of emotionally abusive foster father to her. And Meg has been dealing with this for her whole life. Now she's got to go back after all her adventures with Lester and try to make sense out of who she is, what does it mean to be in a family, and can she face this horrible, horrible father figure? Where is she going to land in this? Whose side is she on? That is another thing that remains to be seen in book 5. I wish I could tell you that Nero is the only big bad that you're going to have to see in the Tower of Nero. Unfortunately, there's another big bad that Apollo will have to face, his old arch nemesis, Python. Now, Python is a lot more than just a big snake. He was the original owner of the caverns of Delphi. He has now taken them back, and Apollo will have to fight him. Now, Apollo has defeated Python before. That's how he got Delphi. The only thing was, the first time, Apollo was an actual god with, like, powers and stuff. Now, he's Lester Papadopoulos with not so much of the powers. Is he going to be able to face his old enemy and somehow defeat him and take back Delphi? He's always known through the Trials of Apollo, this is the biggest, baddest, most difficult challenge he's going to have to face. And this is the book where we find out, does Lester have what it takes? Wow, 5 books in the Trials of Apollo. It is hard to believe that I've been telling this many stories for this many years about a god who, at the beginning anyway, really wasn't a very sympathetic character. I mean, let's be honest, Apollo, he's kind of full of himself. He really thought he was hot stuff. No pun intended, but yeah, he does drive the sun. So, as he's gone through the series, I've really started to feel some more sympathy for him. He's been through a lot. I think being human has taught him a lot. He's learned what it is to lose someone. He's learned what it is to be really faithful and loyal to your friends. Not everything comes easy when you're a demigod or when you're a human. And Apollo, I think, has a new appreciation for that. The question still is, has he learned enough from all the demigods that he's met? All of these heroes we know from Percy Jackson's world. Has he really learned how to be a hero? Because it takes a lot more than just power and immortality to really rise and be like Percy Jackson or one of the other demigod heroes. Now, turning to another topic, I do have some news for you. If you haven't heard yet, it's pretty cool and exciting stuff. The background on this, as you may know, the Percy Jackson series was adapted into 2 movies. This was, 10 years ago now. I was not really involved in those. I tried to sort of give my 2 cents, and I read the scripts and gave some notes, like lots and lots of notes. But, it became pretty clear pretty early that they were interested in doing their own thing. And it was not going to be what I would consider a faithful adaptation. So after I read the scripts, I just kind of sat back and I said, look, guys, if this is the way it's going, I'm out. I really can't do this. And really that was my only option. I mean, I didn't have any control back then. I had no power as an author. Basically the studio was calling all the shots. And that's the way it is really most of the time. Mostly when an author adapts a book. So we sat with that for years and years. There wasn't much we could do. And then the industry kind of got a shake up. Fox, who had the Percy Jackson rights, got bought by Disney. Disney is my publisher. And I started thinking, this is interesting. I wonder if we can sort of shake things up, shake things loose. So a year ago, I started going out to Hollywood in person and having meetings. And boy, did we have a lot of meetings. I talked to everybody. I tried to explain what had happened the first time around, why my readers didn't like it, why I couldn't let that happen again, why I really wanted to make a better adaptation. But after much, much hard work, we finally got an agreement that we are going to produce not more movies, but a TV show based on Percy Jackson. This is going to be done to stream on Disney Plus, which was my idea. I liked this idea. I said, yes, this is the way to do it. We're going to take the 5 books of Percy Jackson. We're going to turn each book into 1 season. That will give us time to really do it right and make each episode the best it can possibly be. So where are we now? We have a team together. I am on that team. I'm not the only voice, but Becky, my wife, and I, who have always been a team behind the books, she's always my best advisor. We are on board. We're part of the process. We have a say. We're at the table. And we can say, look, guys, this is not what Percy would do, or this is not like it is in the book. It's too much of a change. Now, obviously, some things are going to have to change. Movies and TV, they're just not the same as books. You have to show some things a little bit differently. And you can't just go page by page and scene by scene. You do have to have a little bit of flexibility. Also, we kind of want to make it fresh for people that have never read the books and people that have read the books 20 times. If you think you know the story, there still needs to be something new and interesting for you, a reason for you to watch this adaptation. I think we're on the right track. Keep your fingers crossed, still early days, but I'm really excited that we finally seem to be having something in process for you guys. So I will keep you updated on that, but right now I feel real good about it. Oh yeah, and what else have I been doing in my spare time when I haven't been writing novels and I haven't been making trips out to Hollywood and working on the TV show? I've also been getting a master's degree in Gaelic literature at the University College Cork in Ireland. Now, I did this all online. Why would I do this? For one thing, I've always loved mythology, but the one sort of mythology I felt like I could speak to, and I haven't yet, is Celtic mythology, in particular Irish mythology. That's my ancestry. In fact, my ancestors came from Cork City, and they lived like right down the street from this college. That's the main building of UCC. So I thought it was a cool idea to get a degree from that university in Gaelic literature. So I started learning Irish. I started reading the ancient manuscripts of Irish mythology, what we have of it anyway, the folk tales, everything that I could get my hands on. Some of this I knew, but I can tell you now I know it a lot better. I finished my thesis. It's on the god Lugh, and that was a lot of fun. But now I really feel like I'm in a place where I can speak to Irish mythology. And yes, absolutely, the end goal of this is to use that material in children's books, the way I have with Greek and Roman mythology, the way I have with Egyptian and Norse mythology. I feel really close to Irish mythology. I am not Irish myself, but it is my ancestral heritage. I'm not going to tell it the same way an Irish author would. There are many great Irish authors that are doing that. But I do think I have something to contribute. And it's been a lot of fun so far to get into that. But of course, my favorite thing to talk about is not my books, but it's the imprint Rick Riordan presents. This has been incredibly fun for me to do. I have gotten so much satisfaction because I don't get the credit for this. I don't get the money for this. This is all about me getting to book talk other fantastic authors and promoting their books. And if you haven't heard where Rick Riordan Presents came from, basically a few years back, I was talking to my editor at Disney, and she said, Rick, would you ever be interested in the idea of doing your own imprint? An imprint is kind of a subdivision, a brand under the Disney Publishing umbrella. And so I thought, you know, I've always gotten questions like, Rick, would you do a book on Chinese mythology, or would you do Aztec mythology or West African mythology? And all of these great cultural stories are fantastic, but they're not my background and they're not something I'm an expert at. So I thought to myself, wouldn't it be better if I could, rather than doing those stories myself, find authors from those backgrounds, marginalized groups that know these stories, that grew up with these stories and could tell them from the inside with a real understanding and depth that I can't master. So we started looking for own voices authors to tell these stories in the same kind of way that I do with Percy Jackson. So I don't tell them what to write. They don't like model it after Percy Jackson, but we do look for things that are page turners, that have a good sense of humor, that deal with folklore or mythology in some way, and that I think my readers will like. So with each of these books, with all of these authors, I'm able to say, guys, I didn't write this book, but if you like my books, I am pretty sure you're gonna love this too. And boy, have I been happy. I have so far, I mean, I can't even pick a favorite. They're all so amazing. We have, just in the first couple of years, 1.5 million copies of these books in print. They have received a total of 28 starred reviews from various literary journals. This is not normal, guys. Most imprints do not get this kind of reception, and it's because we have such fantastic authors doing great stories. We have the Arush Shah series from Rush Chakshi. Man, it is so good. There are going to be 5 in this series. 3 are out already, and these have been optioned for TV and film by Paramount. We have the New York Times bestselling series, The Stormrunner, which deals with Mesoamerican mythology from J.C. Cervantes. It's been optioned for TV film by Apple. another fantastic series. We have the New York Times bestseller Dragon Pearl by science fiction writer Yoon Ha Lee recently won the Locus Award. And it is such a fantastic mix of Korean mythology and science fiction. It's like nothing you've ever read. We have Carlos Hernandez, who wrote the Sal and Gabby duology, Break the Universe and Fix the Universe, that won the Pura Belpré Award and has been optioned by the Disney Channel. Kwame Mbalia, whose bestseller Tristan Strong has won the Coretta Scott King honor. It's been optioned by Disney. It is, I mean, what can I say? It's West African mythology, African-American mythology mixed together in the modern day, the most sympathetic character you can ever possibly want to meet, and Gum Baby. Wow, Gum Baby alone is worth the price of admission. We have Rebecca Rowanhorse's Race to the Sun, which is about Diné, also called Navajo Sacred Stories. And it is amazing. It's been optioned by Netflix. We also have Taylor K. Mejia's Paula Santiago series, The River of Tears, a retelling of the La Llorona folktale from Mexico, something that, as a Texas boy, I grew up with when I was a kid. Scary stuff. But it's not just a horror story. It's also a lot more than that. It's fantastic. And in fact, great news for Tristan Strong fans. This week, as of October 6th, Tristan Strong Destroys the World is out. This has been getting so much buzz, just like the first book. So many starter reviews, so many fans have been waiting for this. And I can tell you, the sequel does not disappoint. Kwame Mbalia has knocked it out of the park again. Coming in January of 21, I am so excited about this, City of the Plague God by Sarwat Chadha. I have been a fan of Sarwat's for years, ever since his Ash Mystery series. He is such a great writer. He really gets that mix of humor and action that you have to have for these middle grade books. And this is his take on Mesopotamian mythology, quite possibly the coolest mythology ever. Ishtar and the gods of Sumer and Babylon. Oh my gosh, it's fantastic stuff. Now, it also features the first Muslim American protagonist that we've had in the Riordan Presents imprint, and that is really exciting and really important. City of the Plague God, now that may sound like an interesting title to you, given what the world has been dealing with for the last year with COVID-19. When this was written and when it was titled and when we did the cover and we announced everything, this was before anyone had really heard of COVID-19. We had no idea that we were going to be living through basically a modern version of the plague. We thought about that after, obviously the world changed, and we said, I mean, is this still okay to do a book about this? But we thought about it and said, I mean, it's kind of more relevant than ever. I mean, what this tells us is people have been dealing with plagues and figuring out how to cope around pandemics as long as there have been people for thousands of years. And really, the Mesopotamians knew all about this because they had a god of plagues. So, in a way, this is a really cool way to look at how much has changed since ancient times and how much hasn't changed. And Sarwat does a fantastic job bringing mythology and making it very, very relevant to what we're all dealing with these days. Also on the horizon, I think this has to be my favorite Arush Shah cover yet. Arush Shah and the City of Gold. Isn't that awesome? I love it. It's coming out April 6th. Rosh has done such a great job. She was the first author that we published under the imprint, and she really set a very high standard for the books that came after. A standard I think that all of the other authors have also met, and just they've all been fantastic, but she was really our trailblazer. Arush Shah and the City of Gold coming April 6th. I personally cannot wait. Oh my gosh, this book. Gracie Kim, who lives in New Zealand, I don't know how she pulled this off, but she has written a book about Korean witches, clans of Korean witches that live in modern day Los Angeles. The Last Fallen Star. I'm not even sure how to describe it other than to say it's so original that I read it and I said, why has no one thought of this before? This is such a cool idea. The characters are so grounded and so real and so sympathetic. The magic is fantastic. It pulls you right in. And did I mention the food? Oh, whoa, I really want to go to some of these Korean restaurants that the characters visit in LA. I hope some of them at least actually exist, because this book will make you so hungry. And Paolo Santiago is going to be back with the sequel, Forest of Nightmares. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. Taylor is just amazing. She just nails this character. Paola is just like, you want to be Paola's friend. She's just such a great character, and I cannot wait to see what adventure she's getting into in the Forest of Nightmares. And coming September 7th, this is a pretty special book too, Pahua and the Soul Stealer by Lori M. Lee. This one is based on Hmong mythology, which I have to admit, I really don't know much about and didn't know anything until I was introduced to this book. The main character here can see spirits, and she has to find a way to save her brother, who has been taken by mythological forces. It's a great adventure about a mythology that, if you're like me, you may have never really heard of before, but is so rich and so full. Plus, the book has a talking cat. So really, I'm already sold right there. And this, let me tell you, we're doing our first Rick Riordan Presents Anthology of Stories. It's coming out next year, September 28th, and the writers of the imprint have volunteered to write stories about heroes. That's the theme. So each person is writing a new story that'll be part of this. So if you like these authors, but you haven't read enough of them, here under one book, you'll get to read all of them. And I will be contributing a story too. That is my very first look at how I'm tackling Irish mythology. What's it about? Oh, you'll have to wait and see, but I hope you enjoy it. It's really something different and something new for me, and I had a ton of fun writing the story. Okay, guys, it's time to introduce that special guest I promised. It's Eunhod Lee, the author of Dragon Pearl. Yay!
Howdy.
Hi, Yoon. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm doing okay. You know, it's been a weird year for everybody, but we're hanging in there. So I'm so glad you could join us today. And Dragon Pearl is so awesome. I have to start by congratulating you for winning the Locus Award for Dragon Pearl. That is so cool. Did this or did anything else surprise you so far in terms of the reaction that you've gotten from the book?
Well, I guess I had two favorite fan reactions from kids when I was on book tour with that. The first was the kid who came up to me in line to get his book signed, and he's like, "So your heroine is a fox spirit. Does that mean you're a furry?" And I just had no answer for a second. And then I was no, but I wish I could be. And that seemed to satisfy him. And then the other one was the kid, I was talking about how I love to kill off characters. And there was this little kid in the second row, and he went, "Ah!" just like that, like this audible gasp, because the thought of a character, of an author enjoying doing that to his beloved characters was just so horrifying. And I felt like a monster.
Oh,
I'm an author. That's what I do. Like, sometimes you just gotta kill them.
I totally hear you. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I talk to readers now, you know, after they've read whatever it is, 15 books of mine, they're like, "Yeah, we know, Rick. Yeah, thanks a lot." There's no surprise there.
Is killing off characters something that you learned from gaming? I really enjoyed our Dungeons and Dragons session, and I remember you saying recently that you've been a game master, so I was kind of wondering if that played into it.
I never really thought about the whole like killing characters thing off as coming from my D&D days, but I mean, maybe so. Back in the 80s, like when I was in college, Dungeons and Dragons was huge for me. And this is back in the, the Stone Age when it was like edition 1 of D&D and, the physical dice. And but I learned a lot from that. I was a dungeon master and I would have to make up stories for the players, right? And I would learn a lot from that, like how to pace the narrative, for instance. I learned that you couldn't just throw the biggest monster at them right away. You had to kind of build up to it. You couldn't give them equipment that was too powerful, like the +10 Vorpal sword right away, because then you kind of spoiled it and there's nowhere to go from that. So I learned a lot about pacing. And I guess I killed my fair share of PCs, player characters. And it's still something I've been known to do in my books.
I actually learned about pacing not from Dungeons and Dragons because I didn't play that until college, but from video games, because you always start off and you're killing like the little rabbits with your tiny little dagger, and then you have to build up and gain experience until you have the awesome armor and you can take on the big boss. And I learned that you can't drop in the player character or the protagonist against the big boss with the best equipment in the first chapter. You have to really show that journey.
Yeah, totally. Do you have favorite games that really influenced you, do you think?
Planescape Torment, which is, I guess, from the 90s, but it was a Dungeons and Dragons game. And what I really liked about it was the sense of atmosphere and the fact that you could defeat things by combat, but you could also do it by talking to people. So it was very different from the sort of more hack and slash games that I played. I mean, not that I mind hack and slash. I like killing a good monster as well as the next person, but just that emphasis on narrative really influenced me.
Yeah, I get you. I totally do. And it sounds like you've been a sci-fi reader for like a long, long time. And what got you interested in sci-fi?
Two things, I guess. The first encounter I had with science fiction was Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern series. And I know that there's kind of a controversy over whether they're really science fiction or whether they're fantasy, because they do feature dragons that teleport and have telepathy, but it also starts off with that prologue where situating the world on another planet and the fact that they're colonists from Earth. And I remember the first time I read Dragonflight when I was in 4th grade, my mind was completely blown by the time travel storyline. And I knew that I wanted to read more fiction that had really cool ideas like that. The reason I started writing science fiction was later I read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card.
Sure.
And I was just entranced by this, I guess, military saga and all the big space battles. I really like my space battles.
Yeah. I love, Anne McCaffrey is so great. I love Dragon Riders of Pern. I think the first book I read was actually it was a Dragon Singer, which was sort of a spin-off, which I didn't know at the time, but that was my gateway into it. And yeah, you're right. The fantasy and the sci-fi kind of blended together. I have never seen that before. That was awesome.
You seem to read a lot of science fiction in general. What's the appeal for you? And have you ever considered writing a Rick Riordan science fiction novel yourself?
Oh, wow. I do love sci-fi. I love all kinds. I mean, I've read everything that I can get my hands on. In terms of writing myself, I don't know. It's true. I mean, the first story that I ever submitted when I was 13 was to Isaac Asimov's Science Fiction magazine. So that tells you how long I've been reading sci-fi. But even that story wasn't really sci-fi, and that's why they rejected it. That they said it was about a guy who dies and he has a conversation with an angel. And they said, nah, this is more fantasy, but keep writing. You know, you might get there someday. So I don't know. You know, the whole thing about, I don't know, the science in the sci-fi kind of scares me, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, it just seems like I'm not good at math. I'm not good at science itself, the hard stuff. I'm not a good STEM person, so I'm kind of afraid of what that would be like. How has it been for you? Do you have to do a lot of research in physics and space travel and, you know, like integrity of spaceships and stuff like that?
I would say that it depends on the kind of science fiction that you're writing. So if you are doing hard science fiction like, I don't know, The Martian, then yes, you would have to do a lot of research. But I mean, everybody would say that Star Wars is science fiction. And I think that the science content, like the actual hard physics, biology content of Star Wars is probably pretty minimal. So there are definitely kinds of science fiction that you can write without getting too deep into the weeds. I know that I personally have a math degree, but I really don't want to be writing about equations most of the time because that'll turn off a lot of readers. And so when I write science fiction, I mostly concentrate on creating different cultures and different societies, but not so much focusing on hard science or the actual rigors of space travel. There are kinds of science fiction that do that, but you don't have to. You can do the Roger Zelazny thing. He wrote Lord of Light, which won awards, and it's really science fantasy because it's about Buddhism in space, kind of.
Oh, cool.
So you already write about gods. I think it would be a natural leap to write about gods in space if you wanted.
Oh, cool. Thank you. That makes me feel a little better. Maybe I'll think about that.
Do you enjoy writing battle scenes in your books? Like, do you have to block out the action? Because I noticed when I was reading your books that they almost have nonstop action, but there's a real physicality to the scenes that makes them feel very grounded. And I was wondering what your process was for that.
Well, thanks. I'm glad they came across well. I mean, I guess I do enjoy them. They're tricky. I think there's a lot of choreography that goes on. And I don't know. I mean, I remember you and I talked about this sort of about how we approach writing, like the staging of the different scenes. And when I was reading Dragon Pearl for the first time, we were talking about how, you know, I was sort of I was visualizing, okay, you know, where are the characters? And you were telling me that you don't really do that. You're not like a visual thinker per se. And that was really eye-opening for me because I'd never really thought that, you know, there are different ways into the story. For me, it's really very visual. I sort of have the pieces in my head and I kind of have to figure out, okay, well, if Percy's here and Jason's here and there's 3 monsters and they're here, here, and here, you know, how does that work? I guess it goes back to D&D when we had like the physical board, you know, with the players, and you had to think, okay, it's 3 grids away. Is my fireball going to reach them? I guess it really all goes back to that. But you do fantastic battle scenes too, and in space no less, in 3 dimensions. If you don't do it visually, how does it make sense to you to do the battles?
I don't visualize things, which does make choreography very tricky. I think when we were going through Dragon Pearl edits, you like pointed out this one scene where a character teleported again across the room, and that's definitely a failure mode of how I write and why I need editors. But I try to sort of insert myself into the scene and think my way through it kinesthetically, like how it feels to be in the head of the protagonist. I took up fencing a couple years ago, you know, the on-guard kind with swords, and it really helped me a lot because in a physical sword fight, it gave me a sense of where you can be and how to react and what it feels like to be in the driver's seat, I guess, of somebody in a fight. And even if you're writing about spaceship battles and it's not a sword fight per se, I can just sort of pretend to be the ship and think about what it's like to maneuver as the ship or as the person directing the ship. So
I
it's
love
really
that.
sort of a kinesthetic experience.
I love that. So you sort of picture yourself as the ship.
Yeah.
And I like that. That's really cool. You have a lot of great magic too in the books. Your magic items, I want them all. They're so cool. Especially the dragon pearl itself, the item, and it made me wonder, like if you found the dragon pearl personally, what would you do with it?
So if it were specifically the dragon pearl, I think I would use its terraforming magic to heal the planet. Because one of the things that I know, because my husband is an astrophysicist and we talk about this all the time, we only have this one habitable planet in reach. And a lot of science fiction people like to talk about going to the moon or colonizing Mars. But if you think about it, Mars is a death planet. Like if you landed on Mars and your supplies ran out, you can't drive an hour over to the 7-Eleven and pick up more milk. Like that's not a thing on Mars right now. We don't like there's no infrastructure there. There are no farms. And so before we do anything else on other planets, we have to show that we can take care of the planet that we already have. So I would try to heal this planet and make it, more habitable and welcoming for everybody who already lives here.
Hey, that sounds good to me. Well, I hope you find it because we could use that right about now.
Yeah. Do you have any tricks for getting started again when you get stuck in your writing? I know that I struggle with this frequently. Like I get to a point where it's like, I'm just going to have to walk away and do the dishes until I figure out what my next scene is. Does that ever happen to you?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it happens all the time. And I don't know. I guess my process has evolved a little bit over the years. Are you more like a by the seat of your pants sort of writer? Like, do you outline or do you just sort of go along as you go? Or
I guess I'm a hybrid because I make an outline and then I ignore it. But I have to have the outline in order to ignore it. It's kind of messed up.
That's great. I'm going to try that next time. Yeah, I would say I'm a hybrid too, in that I do the outline. I don't ignore it, but I do follow it loosely. Mm-hmm. And I like it to be organic enough where I have kind of the general plan, but the details will surprise me as I go along. And yeah, sure. I mean, even with the outline, which does help, I get stuck. I guess I've just given myself permission over the years to just let myself be stuck. Because even if I'm not staring at the screen, like you mentioned doing the dishes, yeah, that's a good one. Walking the dog, just folding the laundry, whatever it is, taking a walk, your brain is still working. And so you're really still writing, even if you're not typing in the words. You just have to give yourself some processing time. So it works out.
It's just hard to convince my husband that he needs to leave some dishes in the sink and not put them all in the dishwasher, because I'm like, Joe, this is literally part of my writing process, is doing the dishes so I can get my ideas unstuck. My husband is a physicist and he's like, this is nonsense. What are you talking about? So it's a kind of a controversy in my household.
I can get that. Yeah. It's tough when you're creative and, maybe it doesn't look like you're actually working, but you are. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I know, well, I don't know what you're working on right now, but I do know that you have agreed to write a sequel to The Dragon Pearl, or a book at least set in the same universe as The Dragon Pearl for Rick Riordan Presents. And I am so excited about that book. Is there anything you can give me, anything you can tease about what we might see?
I am having tremendous fun writing it right now. It's from the viewpoint of a non-binary tiger spirit whose uncle is Captain Juan from the last book, so the villain from the last book. So there is some baggage there. And Min will make another appearance, so there will be more fox magic and more fox tricks. And Min will get into trouble because that's what she does.
Yes. Oh, that makes me so happy. I can't wait to read it. Yay.
I find it kind of hilarious, actually, because some readers find Min a little bit tough to warm up to because she's so chaotic and she's such a troublemaker. And I'm like, but she's a fox spirit. Like, fox spirits are not paladins. They're not lawful creatures, and I really wanted to reflect that when I was writing these books.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're a fox spirit, you got to be a fox spirit, right?
I wanted to ask, since we're talking about tricksters and people who are maybe not entirely lawful, which has been your favorite villain to write? I realize this must be a hard question to answer because there have been so many fantastic villains.
Oh gosh, I love villains. They're so much more fun than heroes to write about. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be them or have them as my friend, but yeah, they're really fascinating characters. Gosh, I have to say, Nero, the Emperor in the Trials of Apollo series, has been the hardest, but also the most satisfying and interesting villain to write about. I guess because he's not just your standard bad guy. He's sort of insidious, and he gets under your skin, and he manipulates. He's really an emotional abuser, and that makes him really evil. But the sort of evil that it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around and figure out, how do you fight that? You can't just swing a sword and defeat him. You have to sort of get your own mind in a state where you know what you need, and you're not listening to his lies. And that's a really difficult kind of villainy, I think, to overcome. So he's been a lot of fun to write about.
I think the thing that fascinated me about Nero is that he's a kind of evil that all of us have the potential to encounter in everyday life, as opposed to, the 100-foot dragon or whatever. Or at least I hope there is not going to be a 100-foot dragon in my life. But people who are manipulative or sneaky, maybe not on the same scale as Nero, but, who have that kind of nature, that's something we have to deal with in our own lives.
Oh, it's totally true. Yeah. And that's the thing about villains. I mean, they can be fantastical, but really I think they reflect a kind of conflict that all of us have to deal with. That's what makes them interesting and what makes them terrifying. Well, it has been so wonderful to talk to you again. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. Before we end this, I want to issue a challenge to you.
Okay.
You can do this.
I knew this was coming, but I'm scared. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to challenge you to change your appearance like Min does in the Dragon Pearl book.
Just like to fool people with, you mean? Like any sort of...
Or extra tails. Tails are always good.
Extra tails. Okay. All right, I'll give that some thought, but I think I can do that. Challenge accepted.
Awesome.
All right, take care, Yoon. Thanks again. Well, you heard it. Yoon wants me to change my appearance to fool people the way the fox spirits do in Dragon Pearl. Little does Yoon know, though, I'm a quick change artist. Watch this. Diagliva harja, iskiltor nach me. Oh, chero walaru, chero walaru, chero walaru veri, chero walaru fanso notago walaru. You probably didn't even realize it, but that dashing Boron player you just saw, that was actually me. Did I convince you that I was in a band playing traditional Irish music? I nailed it, didn't I?
Why did that guy get such easy trials? Is he favored by Zeus or something? Okay.
Thank you so much, Rick. This is Margaret from Politics in Prose, and we're going to get some audience questions going now.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Great. Hang on a sec. I'm just going to pull up the questions and we'll get underway. All right, here we go. First up, we have Kate from Virginia, and she asks, what has writing this series taught you about life? It has taught so many children and teens everywhere valuable lessons, but what have you learned, if anything?
That's a great question. I think probably it's taught me that narrators can have really dramatic story arcs, even if I don't necessarily think they're going to. Apollo, for instance, I mean, he's been around for 4,000 years. I never thought of him as someone who changes. You know, he's pretty much always been the way he is. But in the Trials of Apollo, he comes a long way from being a real whiny, you know, former god to learning a lot about himself. So that surprised me. And it was also really gratifying to write a character like that had such, well, character growth. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Next up, we have Ashby. And Ashby asks, what would you write about next if not Percy Jackson's world?
Yeah, I think that Percy's world is sort of wrapped up in terms of the major story arc. I don't see any more like big 5-book series. I think I like the idea right now of writing standalone novels just because it allows me to pivot from one thing to another more quickly. In terms of what, you know, there are Percy based kind of character stories I'd love to explore, but there are also a lot of other ideas that I have. Some I can't really talk about yet, but I have a lot of irons in the fire. I'm working on several different things right now. But one I can say I'll probably do is what I mentioned earlier, Irish mythology. That's definitely something I'd like to explore, and that'll probably be a standalone novel. What that'll look like exactly, I'm not sure yet, but one thing I can promise, I'll keep writing.
Oh, that's great. And I love to hearing about this new venture of yours with the Celtic. Okay, Emily asks, would you ever think about writing a spin-off book with the 7 kids learning their parents' pasts?
I don't know. I'm a little afraid of writing prequels just because it's really hard to do a prequel well, in my opinion. Because you know what the story is leading to. So backing up and sort of showing them at an earlier phase of their life, it can lose some of the tension, the dramatic tension in it. So I have avoided doing that sort of thing. I tend to like thinking forward rather than in reverse, you know, like, okay, can I back it up? And certainly there are some wonderful stories that could be told there. Whether that'll end up happening or not, I'm not sure. It's not on like my short-term radar, at least.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Now we have a question from Christina, and she says, I am from Canada. Do you have any advice for young writers hoping to accurately represent diversity in their writing? I think it's so important, but it can sometimes feel a bit daunting since I don't want to get it wrong.
Sure. It's a great question, and it's a very natural concern. I mean, if we only wrote about ourselves, you know, and our personal experience and background, that would make for a very narrow, limited sort of book that really wouldn't be very much fun. When you live in a world that is beautifully diverse, as we do, you kind of want to honor that and show that. At the same time, you have to, of course, be respectful and sensitive and realize that some stories really aren't yours to tell. So finding the balance there and knowing when it's best to back off and when it's good to be representative and inclusive, it can be tough to do. I think the thing that I would say is find some people that you really trust that can be your sounding board. If you're in doubt, ask. If you're trying to represent a character, ask and see if you can find there are great sensitivity readers out there, which was to me anyway in the last few years a pretty new concept. I mean, I don't think I'd heard that term until like about 5 years ago, and it's a wonderful and very valuable thing that we can have a conversation about how various groups are represented and whether it works. Now, that doesn't inoculate you from criticism. You know, you can have 5 sensitivity readers read your manuscript and still, you know, it won't ring true to perhaps other readers of that particular group, because obviously no group is a monolith. You know, not everybody's going to see things the same way. That's fine. I mean, that shouldn't be expected that you're going to like hit it 100% with every type of representation. So I guess the thing I would say is read a lot, know what you're writing about, know why you're doing that representation, why it's important and why that needs to be in the book. And then check yourself by seeing if you can get people to read it that can advise you on what you're not sure of.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that advice and insight. That's really nice to hear. Now we have a question from PJ in Rochester, New York. He says, "Hi, Uncle Rick. Who or what was your inspiration for Meg McCaffrey? She's one of my favorite characters from all of your books. P.S. Thanks for writing my favorite books of all time."
Yay. Hey, PJ. Well, my wife, Becky, is a Rochester native, so say hi to Rochester for us. Meg is wonderful. I wanted to do a child of Demeter because I hadn't done a demigod of that particular heritage before, and I thought it would be really interesting to have a main character like that. I don't know exactly where Meg came from, but I needed a foil, sort of a contrast for Apollo, somebody who was really no nonsense and very assertive, very competent, but was just not going to take any of Apollo's whining. That, you know, was going to, when needed, sort of bring him back down to earth, quite literally. And Meg was definitely that person. And, you know, Meg is also somebody who's dealing with the after effects and the ongoing effects of this emotional abusive relationship with Nero, which is like the most horrible foster father you can imagine. And I thought that was really important to talk about too, because a lot of kids, unfortunately, you know, this is a life experience that they have to go through, and a lot of adults have to deal with this as well. Our relationships are not always ideal, and you know, what happens and how do you learn how to stand up for yourself? And so Meg's journey, I think, resonated for a lot of people, and I wanted to honor that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. We have a question from Louise, and she asks, will the Kane Chronicles ever be turned into a movie?
Well, I'm glad you asked. We talked a little bit about Percy on Disney+, but at the same time, we have been dealing with Netflix to bring the Kane Chronicles there as live action feature films. So we are, my wife and I, Becky, we are full producers on that project. We are in the writing mode right now. We have a scriptwriter working on the screenplay. And we're starting with The Red Pyramid as the first feature film, with the thought that if that goes well, then we'll move on to the other books. So that's really exciting. We have a great team in place, and looking forward to seeing how it turns out.
Oh, so exciting. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Valerie asks, how does it feel to finally reach a conclusion with Camp Half-Blood after so many years? And she also says, thank you for all the memories and stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for reading them. My gosh, I mean, the readers are so wonderful, and they've been with me for so long. A lot of these, folks that have been reading literally grew up with the books, and that's a huge honor for me. It feels good. It feels bittersweet. I like to compare it to graduation. It's sort of like I'm excited that I accomplished something and I can wrap it up and move on to other things. But I also feel sad that I'm never going to perhaps be with this exact cast of characters again in this environment. Sure, I may come back for reunions or whatever and visit once in a while, but the main arc is done. And that's really a moment to sort of, for me to sit back and say, wow, this has been quite a journey. 15 books, that's a lot.
Amazing, wonderful. Okay, we have from Jonah, who's in Connecticut. You are so often praised for the amount of racial and LGBT representation in your books. To you, what is the most important reason for representing marginalized communities in kids and young adult literature?
Well, I mean, like we were sort of talking about earlier with representation, I mean, I think there's two sort of parallel tracks we have to keep in mind. One is that people from life experiences that are not like ours should have possession of their own stories and be able to tell those stories in their own voices. So, empowering people that are from those backgrounds, that needs to be paramount. And that's why Rick Riordan Presents the imprint does what it does. At the same time, I think it's also powerful for people to see themselves represented in the quote unquote mainstream, that authors like me who may not be part of the LGBT community or of a marginalized racial group acknowledges them and says, I have this fantasy world. It's inclusive. And if you are wondering whether you can be a hero at Camp Half-Blood, the answer is always, absolutely, you can. So it's sort of from the outside trying to be as inclusive as I can. I'm never going to be able to sort of completely get any one particular life experience that is not my own, but I can at least try to do the best I can to include all kinds of kids in the books. And these are not just abstracts to me. I mean, these are my students. Every type of kid you can imagine I have taught over the years from my 15 years in the classroom. So it's very important to me that I honor them and I remember them and I validate what they went through, because middle school is a tough time, no matter what you're going through or what your background is.
Thank you. Yeah. Jessica asks, there are a lot of song references in Trials of Apollo. Are there some songs you discovered while writing the series that you wouldn't have listened to otherwise?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the fans kind of often clue me into different, pop phenomenon that I'm not necessarily aware of, and then I'll go check it out. Harry Styles would be a great example of that. Super stuff, great album. His a solo album. And I don't think I would have probably picked that up if, I hadn't heard from readers that he was really worth checking out. And Stevie Nicks said so too. So that was also, for my generation, that was, okay, well, if Stevie Nicks likes it, it must be all right. Taylor Swift, I don't know that I would have ever listened to Taylor Swift just like on my own, but she's a fabulous artist. She's really great. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think that, older folks like me can really learn a lot if we listen to young folks and respect the fact that, they know what they're talking about. Their taste is really very good, and they have a lot to offer and a lot to say.
Couldn't agree more. We have a question from Gabriela from Mexico, and she asks, if you could have a cameo on the upcoming Disney show, what character would you like to play?
Becky and I have talked about this, and she has some ideas about, where I could sort of crop up and just be kind of a funny extra. I don't know. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. It's definitely, I mean, if they insist on me doing it, okay, fine. I mean, it's not really, being in front of the camera is not something that's ever been high on my list of things I wanted to do. But I guess if Stan Lee can do it, that's got to be good enough for me.
All right, moving on to a very different type of question. This is from Hope. She asks, how did school libraries play a role in becoming the person you are today?
Libraries in general are so important. I mean, I remember my local library and also my school library very fondly. Some of my earliest memories are sitting in the library. For so many kids, and I think I was one of those, it was a sanctuary. It was a quiet place in the middle of the storm. School always felt like a tempest to me. Everything was swirling around it, always so many kids, and everything was happening, and it was very loud and scary sometimes. But if you go to the library, you could always find a quiet place to sit and collect your thoughts. And the librarians are like the best people, and they will always be there for you. And if you want a book, great. If you just want to hang out, that's fine too. It meant a lot to me. I think libraries in schools, they're just so critical that we have that space for kids, and that it's more of a sort of a, I don't know, like a concierge sort of, as the librarian, where the teacher, is of course a wonderful figure but they have to cover so much, and they have to sort of cover the curriculum for the entire class. The librarian is sort of like your personal reading concierge. You can go in and they can really hear, what do you like? What do you want to read? And they can match the book to the child. And that's just absolutely critical. When I hear about schools that aren't able to have libraries, it just breaks my heart, because it's the lungs, of the school body.
So true, so true. Next up, Anaya from Rockville asks, what would happen if Jason and Aru Shah met, since they both have lightning bolt powers?
I'm just trying to imagine that in my head. Wow, that's a mind blower. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. They would probably commiserate, about how hard it is to have that particular set of powers. And does yours ever blow up your smartphone? Do you ever, cause blackouts, in like a citywide grid? I think they just end up sort of, shooting the breeze and talking to each other, and talking about how terrible it is to be a lightning inflicted person.
Comparing notes. Okay, and also Javid from Rockville asks, are you planning to write about another mythological world next? Which you kind of talked about, but why don't you just elaborate?
Sure. Well, Irish mythology is a pretty amazing place to write about, and I am kind of toying with different ideas. That and the overall the Celtic umbrella of which Irish mythology is a part. So that's on the front burner. In terms of other mythologies, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought of any that I want to explore that I feel like I could explore. So Celtic is the only thing that comes to mind. Having said that, there are a lot of other fantasy worlds that are out there that I've been thinking about. I don't think I'll ever run out of ideas, that's for sure.
Great, thank you. All right, now listen to this one. This is from Scarlett, and she's in the UK. And what she's saying is that today, which is already now October 10th, I think we're just a little past midnight over in the UK. So happy birthday, Scarlett. It's her birthday today. And she is wondering if birthdays you gave the characters were deliberate or random in your stories.
Well, happy birthday. It's very late or very early over there, so thank you for joining us. That's wonderful. Some of the birthdays, I would say most of them are random. I'm sorry to say, I didn't look at their star charts or think about, their zodiac signs, really. It was mostly about the time period that I was writing about, and if a birthday made sense to talk about. That's why a lot of them have summer birthdays, because so many of the books happen during the summer. So I thought it was important for Percy's birthday, for instance, to be toward the end of the camp session, to sort of mark every year a rite of passage. But they don't have any particular significance. They're not related to birthdays of people I know or anything like that. And if a character's birthday is not mentioned, it doesn't exist. I mean, I don't know what it is either. So you're welcome. You're welcome to assign them if you so feel like you'd like to.
Oh, that's great. All right. And now we have a question from Tanya, all the way from India. What inspired you to create the character of Samara Abbas?
Yes, Samira is in the Magnus Chase series, and she was the first Muslim American character that I got to write on as sort of a real main character in the book. You know, like all of my characters, Samira is loosely based on many of the Muslim students that I taught in the past. One particular young lady that I remember, and this is going back to the 2001 Twin Towers attacks, when I was in the middle school classroom at that time, and she was one of my students at the time. And one of my strongest memories of that day is when we heard the news, and as a Muslim American, it hit her so hard that she just burst into tears in the classroom, because she instantly understood not only how terrible this was for the country, but also how terrible it was that she would now be forced to sort of be an ambassador for her faith and her background, and to sort of explain to people and to kind of defend herself and say, this is not who I am, this is not who we are, this is not what Islam is about. And that was such a huge burden for her as a 13-year-old kid to be faced with this, that my heart just broke for her. And certainly I tried to be there for her, but I was keenly aware of how difficult a time this was. And she's only one of the many Muslim students that I've taught, but that always stuck with me. And I thought, someday I really would love to have a character who is a strong Muslim American young lady who is both very committed to her faith, but also, very, very modern and a hero, and, really in every sense an American citizen, and very committed to things that she wants to do, and has a really strong self-identity, and to show that there are a lot of young ladies and young men out there, and that is more the norm than not, that they're just trying to be full people like all of us are, and they deserve that opportunity. So that was a very long answer, but I hope that made some sense.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That was interesting. We have a question from Casey, who's in Annandale, Virginia. Who is the most difficult character for you to write about, and why?
Well, I guess the less like myself a character is, the more I have to be careful to make sure I'm writing correctly about their experience, and the more difficult it is for me to sort of put myself into their shoes. But I think, generally speaking, the villains are both the most rewarding and the hardest. Nero was really difficult to write about. Partly because he's just so awful and so nasty, and in such a subtle way. I enjoyed it, but it was really difficult to write about him.
We have a related question from Bree, and she asks, are some characters easier to get into their mindset than others? And if you get stuck, what do you do?
Sure. Well, I mean, the classic example is Percy Jackson himself. He's very easy for me to write about, because he's partly me, he's partly my son. He has my sense of humor. His voice as a young middle school guy, that's my experience. I remember that very well. And so he's extremely easy to write about, just because I feel very close to his experience and his voice. So, writing from Percy's point of view is like I always say it's like, a comfortable old pair of jeans. You just, they fit well, and you know them, and they're very comfortable. But I think I enjoy writing from a lot of different points of view, and that's one of the beauties of being a writer, is you get to try on all kinds of different voices and life experiences. That's a lot of fun.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. This is from Ella. Is there one aspect of your career that makes you feel particularly proud, other than your awesome fans?
Well, I would say my awesome fans are, the main thing is hearing from them. I would say this, that the longer that I'm in this life, the more that young people come back to me and inform me of how their lives have been shaped by the books or by my years in the classroom, the more rewarding it becomes. I think that's the main thing, is hearing back from young people who have grown up, whether it's my former students. So many of them have now gone on to become teachers themselves or writers themselves. Some have gone on to become doctors and social advocates of various kinds, and they've gone on to such great careers and become such wonderful people. That's really, really nice. That they think that they want to share that with me, and that their time with me, however short it may have been, still strikes them as something formative and something positive. And the same with writing, hearing back from fans that say, I started your books when I was 8 and now I'm an adult. Well, first of all, that makes me feel really old, but it's also really great when they say, this is really the series that got me started, or I became a classics major because of this book, or I became a teacher because of them, or whatever it is. Just sort of seeing the ripples that go out from what I've tried to do is just absolutely priceless to me.
Well, I'm sure it's so gratifying. We have a question from Whitney, Haley, and Nathan. They're 11, 9, and 7 respectively. It says, will you please write more Magnus Chase books? And then they also comment, we think the representation of a gender fluid kid is awesome.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. I love Magnus Chase, and Alex Spiro is absolutely one of my favorites. Again, not just a made up character, very much based on, the experiences of students that I've taught in the past. And I just kind of wanted to, as best I could, honor them. But I'd love to write more about Magnus. I think that would be probably another standalone project that I would do if I were to undertake that. I'm not sure when that would happen, but I'm certainly not saying no. They're based in Boston, and so am I. And so, Magnus and company, they're my neighbors.
Excellent. All right, we have one last question, and it's, the question is, as the mom of a kid with ADHD and dyslexia, I appreciate how you address these conditions in your book. What advice would you give kids who get discouraged because of the difficulty they have in school that is a result of their ADHD and or dyslexia?
Sure. Well, as I've talked about many times before, Percy Jackson really was, at its core, it was about representation, because it was told as a bedtime story for my son who has ADHD and dyslexia and really needed some affirmation that it was going to be okay. I guess that's the big message that I would give to kids with learning differences is, I know it may be hard, but recognize that it will get better. And the classroom only measures a very small sort of range of successfulness. And just because you're struggling in a classroom environment does not mean that you're going to struggle forever. And in fact, kids with learning differences very often go on to become incredibly successful adults, because you have the advantage of looking at the world in a different way. And that is invaluable in the world of creativity, in the world of business, in just about every field you can imagine. You sort of have to be a divergent thinker if you're struggling with learning differences. You think outside the box. And Don't let anybody tell you that's a weakness. It's not. It's a huge strength.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I think that winds down our time with the questions. Thanks to the audience for such great questions, and thanks to the audience for joining us, but especially thank you, Rick, for such an amazing presentation tonight. And thank you for joining us on PNP Live.
Absolutely. Thanks, Politics and Prose, and thanks everybody for joining us. Take care, everybody.
Stay safe,
Good night.
stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye.